Welcome to The Other Side, Mississippi Today's political podcast. The Other Side lets you hear directly from the most connected players and observers across the spectrum of politics in Mississippi. From breaking news to political strategy to interviews with candidates and elected officials, we'll bring you facts, perspectives, and context that helps you cut through the noise and understand all sides of the story. I'm your host, Adam Ganucheau. Really excited about today's episode. Joining me today in the studio is the Reverend Dr. Jason Coker. I've got a little bio for you here, Jason, that I want to read just so everybody's got a little bit of a clear picture of who you are. But I imagine we're going to talk a little bit more about who you are too. But Jason's a native of Shaw, Mississippi Delta boy. Felt a call to ministry while a student at Mississippi Delta Community College. He graduated from William Carey University with a degree in religion and went to seminary at the Yale Divinity School. Jason serves currently as the president of Together for Hope, a rural development coalition that seeks to alleviate persistent rural poverty in the United States. There's a lot there, and I think the reason I really wanted to have you on today was because you have been very active at the state capitol and really just in the state political arena in recent months and years, even in a sort of faith-based coalition of people who are pushing for Medicaid expansion.
Absolutely.
I guess just to start us off, I think this is gonna be a really interesting and insightful conversation. But what does a white Baptist pastor from the Mississippi Delta, what business does he have advocating for Medicaid expansion in Mississippi right now?
It's a great question, and I think for me it's obvious in the sense that this whole state. You look at the political landscape from top to bottom, who is in power, who has been in power, and how long have they been in power. It tends to be white men who are Baptist or at least religious on paper. So who else better to challenge that than somebody who looks exactly like them? I mean, when you're talking about alleviating problems, you got to ask, like, where did the problem come from? There's just no getting around it that people who look just like me created the system in which we live, a system that creates poor health outcomes, a system that creates poor educational outcomes, a system that creates terrible policy that drives incredible poverty, the highest poverty rates in the nation. That's the system that our legislative body has created for this state. And then that same power structure looks at the poverty they created and blames those who are in poverty for it, saying they're lazy, sorry, and don't want to work. And so I try to clap back at that as much as I can, just because it's not functioning as a broken system. That is the way the system has been designed, and we're trying to not just dismantle this poverty-driving system. We're trying to recreate something and talk about human dignity. And for me, that comes right out of my faith as a Christian. So.
Yeah, let's talk about that. I mean, you, like I said, you have been at the Capitol. You've been front and center in sort of leading this group of clergy, and it's multi-faith. It's not just Christian clergy, but multi-faith group coalition that is, pushing for Medicaid expansion in Mississippi, which, by the way, has long been considered a pipe dream here. Mississippi, of course, just to recap, if you haven't been tuned in this year, lawmakers at the state capitol are for the first time earnestly debating and considering whether or not we should become the next state in America to expand Medicaid. 40 other states have already done it. This is a policy that would stand to serve, 200,000-ish Mississippians, provide them health care. Many of those 200,000 can't currently afford it. It would help sort of inject an infusion of cash and financial stability to many hospitals, particularly rural hospitals across the state that are on the verge of closing because of financial problems right now. It would bring in $1.5 billion in new federal revenue to the state, the poorest state in the nation, the unhealthiest state in the nation. There's a long list here of benefits that countless experts of science, of economic sort of studies have said would be a benefit to the state. We're looking to become the 41st of 50, of course, states in the country to do this. Several other Republican states even have done it to this point.
Absolutely.
We have been a holdout. So with that context in mind, you've been at the Capitol with this group. It's not just, you haven't just been working with the clergy. I know you've also been working with some of the other sort of advocacy groups, sort of organizations that also push for better health care in Mississippi, better access to health care in Mississippi. But particularly as it relates to your work with this group of clergy, what would you say is the faith argument for Medicaid expansion in Mississippi?
It is the simplest and most bedrock Christian thing. In the Gospel of John, Jesus says, a new commandment, a new mandate I give to you, love one another. That's the Gospel of John. In Matthew, Mark, and Luke, Jesus said, when asked what's the greatest commandment in the entire Bible, what's the one verse Jesus says, love God, quoting Deuteronomy, and love your neighbor, quoting Leviticus. And these two are the greatest things. Paul, in his letter, says the entire law is summed up in this, that you love one another. It is absolutely that simple. There's just too many passages over and over and over again throughout the New Testament in particular, because I'm a Christian, but also throughout the Old Testament that says this is how you treat the stranger, this is how you treat the most vulnerable, this is how you treat the foreigner. You always do it from a place of love, care, respect, and dignity. And that's all this is. If you have the capacity to provide health care to vulnerable populations, most of those people working very hard, multiple jobs, if you have the capacity to care for them and provide them a way to get health insurance, why wouldn't you do that? Like, I feel like the Christian thing to do is to do that, no matter what the politics are, right? It is almost, and I mean, you can even make the argument that if you can do something for somebody, why would you withhold it? And this is blaming the poor, right? This is based on the idea that there's some people that deserve help and others who don't.
The opposition, for sure, the political opposition has been mainly in recent weeks,
right,
that this is just simply an expansion of welfare,
and
we don't need to do that.
Like this, it gets very personal to me here. I grew up very poor in the Mississippi Delta. My grandparents worked in fields until they died, and my grandfather died early of lung cancer. He never had insurance, and when he went to the doctor, finally, because his coughing, he had stage 4 lung cancer. He died within a month.
Wow.
My parents worked in factories until those factories closed down and moved abroad because of federal policy. My folks and my lineage is a lineage of labor. My grandmother, when we were working in the garden as a kid, and I tell this story a lot, especially to my kids to let them know, but when we would complain about working in the garden, she goes, when I was 12 years old, my daddy said he'd give me a quarter if I could pick 300 pounds of cotton in a day. Wow. Now, that's about a grown man's working, picking a quarter acre of cotton.
Sure.
And she did. And then he said, now that you know you can, here's your quarter. Now that you know you can do it every day. Mm. That's who we're talking about. We're talking about people who work like that every day, but earn poverty wages. Yeah. They make too much money to qualify for any subsidies right now,
right,
but they don't make nearly enough money to actually pay for insurance. And then this idea that if they could pay, they could get on the exchange for $25 a month, well, then they have to pay $5,000 a deductible. Yeah. They don't have if you're making $20,000 a year, which puts you above that poverty threshold, sure, and you have to spend $5,000 in a deductible, you're right back at the poverty line again.
That's right.
And the problem, some of the problem is the fact that poverty line hasn't changed in years.
Yeah.
Nobody's talking about what makes that poverty line the poverty line. Let's try to live on $15,000 a year as an adult in America anywhere.
Sure.
You can't do it. So there's all kind of things wrong with it. I think the bedrock of this is so many of our legislators are not poor. None. Let me just be real clear. None of our legislators are poor, and very few of them have ever experienced what that's like, and fewer still even truly know somebody who's struggling financially in life.
Yeah.
It's just such a disconnect between people who make policy and the people who are directly affected by it. And I'll say this, after having said that, the House bill that came out was fairly remarkable, truly remarkable.
It was a true expansion plan down to the definition of it. It would sort of increase that threshold of coverage to 138% of the poverty line, which still I think is like $28,000 a year or something. It's really not a lot of money still that you would have to make under that to qualify here, but it would expand to that additional sort of up to 200,000 Mississippians would qualify for the program in that scenario. So,
and that's where that 138% comes in,
right.
right? If you're making 138%, the Senate bill, I'm so glad it came out. I'm so glad the bill went forward.
Yeah.
But they were talking about expanding it up to 99%.
Let's talk about this process really quick. I don't want to get away from the sort of morality and faith argument, but I do think for anyone listening, it's important. So, like you said, Jason, the House did pass this bill that was, traditional expansion under the federal definition of the term expansion. They sent it to the Senate where it sat untouched. At least there was not public movement on it for about a month. And that's really when y'all got engaged. These faith leaders came to the Capitol at least once, more than once for some of y'all I know, to basically call out the Senate and say, do the right thing here, get this across the finish line. After that month, the Senate finally unveiled their tweaked version of it, which I say tweaked. It was pretty hardcore change. It was tossed. The House plan was tossed, and they rewrote it to basically take any of the sort of traditional expansion definitions out of it.
Right.
They only would cover up to 99% of the federal poverty line, which that would cover, they estimate, about 40,000 Mississippians. Those are the people who make nothing. Basically nothing, who don't currently qualify for Medicaid. That's a good thing. I think all of us would say at least get those people covered. But what happens when you cap it at 99% of the federal poverty rate, as the Senate has proposed, is the state can't draw down the full force of that federal matching funding, which means the Senate plan, if it passes, would leave $600 or $700 million per year from the federal government every year on the table, which means we wouldn't get that money. It would ensure so far fewer Mississippians than the House plan would. So where we are in the process, the House sent their expansion plan to the Senate. The Senate basically gutted that plan, sent back to the House this very watered down version that would not be considered Medicaid expansion, by the way. And now where we are is the House and Senate will send a small group of leaders from both of their chambers, 3 from the House, 3 from the Senate. They will go into what's called a conference committee meeting, probably several meetings over the course of these last few weeks of session, and they will try to hammer out the details and come to some agreement on what this could be. So that's where we are now.
And the bill from the Senate is very similar to what happened in Georgia, and they call that partial expansion. Yeah. After they did all of that work and partially expanded in Georgia, they had a whopping 3,500 people across the state get on the exchange.
And currently, to add to that, the state of Georgia is spending tens of millions of dollars per year in state money to make the program work, to keep it afloat.
But listen,
and it's
just
not
to be
serving more than 3,500 people.
To tell truth, that is insurance companies having strength towards politicians. When our insurance commissioner came out and said what he said about what he thought about this whole thing, it was the Georgia plan. It was, we want people to have private insurance.
Yeah.
I don't have anything. I don't have a problem with that. But I don't. The politics of our day are such that our state doesn't want to work with the federal government unless the federal government's run by a party line person, right? And that incapacity to work together, that's devastating for the state of Mississippi. It's devastating for the state of Georgia. It's devastating for our country. And these are our elected officials, and they're modeling childish behavior. And it's giving adults and our own children permission to act like children instead of adults. And I think, I have 3 kids, man. I don't want my kids acting like some of these guys do in the public sphere, saying some of those things in the public sphere. Like, we can absolutely do better than that as people, much less Christians. That kind of, and it's not just a matter of decorum. It's about human integrity. And that's what I feel is lost in the partisan politics. I am not doing this to push a partisan agenda. I'm doing this because I feel in the deepest sense of my humanity and the deepest sense of my faith that God would care for people.
Yeah. I think, the partisan line argument that some have been trying to wage in opposition to expansion this year is, on its face, it may have once have been partisan, really, but it's not. I mean, you've got 75% of the Republican caucus in the House voted for expansion this year.
Right, that's exactly right.
You've got, about that same number of Republicans in the Senate who voted on a watered-down version, a partial expansion bill. You've got, Republicans, prominent Republicans all over the country, including somebody by the name of Mike Pence. I don't know if Republicans listening have heard of that guy, but who have pushed this exact policy through their own states because they saw the benefits and they are reaping them right now. One other point about the policy, and I want to get into some more of the morality of this, but this notion that Mississippi can't afford this or that taxpayers shouldn't be on the hook to help poor people, whatever. I mean, these are real arguments that are being made, which is hard to believe. But I would just point out that this is just an undeniable fact. Mississippi taxpayers today are paying federal taxes that are going to Washington that are then flowing to these other 40 states that have expanded. So Mississippi taxpayers are already paying for Medicaid expansion
today. We are paying
but for other states.
We are paying out of our federal tax dollars, and I pay taxes. I mean, this is that time of year when everybody's paying their taxes, are figuring out how much they owe the government. And Pam and I, my wife and I, are professionals, so we're. By any stretch of the imagination, we're rich. Anywhere in the world, we're rich. We're rich in America. And there will be people who would laugh at that because, how we live, but we are. We pay, up to 30% of our gross income to the federal government, as we should. And we are paying for California and New York and Massachusetts and all 40 states who've expanded. We're paying for their citizens to have access to affordable health care. And we refuse to do that and take advantage of our own tax dollars for our own state. It is mind-blowing.
Yeah. You mentioned sort of some of the opposition to this in the legislature right now. You mentioned the insurance companies, which I'm glad you did. It's a good point. We've reported some of that. Another big sort of, I guess, the main opposition to expansion at this point is our governor, Tate Reeves.
Right.
Jason, you sent me an op-ed. You sent out to, I think, several outlets an op-ed that you wrote about a week ago now, that was sort of a follow-up or response to Mississippi Today's Jeff Pender, who, if you listen to this podcast, you know him well. He wrote a column that was titled Business and Hospital Leaders Across the State Are Silent Right Now, and the title that he put on it was Because of a Fear of Tate, or FOT. He reported in that column that a lot of these very typically vocal lobbies, the hospitals, the major businesses, the big sort of corporate business community,
Right.
has been weirdly silent. As he said, as he wrote, the silence there is deafening. And he reported out that the big reason for that is because they're worried that Governor Tate Reeves, who is the reason, for the record, just I'll state it plainly, he is the reason we haven't expanded yet. But they are worried about retribution from him. And you wrote this op-ed that I'm going to let you describe it in more detail, but to sum it up, you're arguing that lawmakers right now themselves, including the senators who the governor is lobbying, shouldn't have a fear of Tate and FOT. They should have a fear of God, FOG.
Absolutely.
Talk to us about that.
Let's make no mistake about it. Our governor has real power, and he has demonstrated in his tenure that he is willing to use that power in retribution. So I understand that, and I get that. But I don't worship our governor. I don't pray to our governor. I don't sing hymns to our governor. I go to church on Sunday morning and I pray to God Almighty. The hymns we sing are glorifying what God did through Jesus Christ. I mean, and we just celebrated Easter, the most power. You're talking about power, right? We're talking about the power of life over death. That if you're going to fear anything, fear God. I mean, and the Bible tells us over and over, the beginning of wisdom is the fear of God. And that fear of God, I mean, I think about the wisdom in expanding Medicaid. There's real wisdom there. It's economically smart. It takes care of the most vulnerable and the most hardworking people.
It will save lives.
It will save lives. That is wise. Over and over again throughout Scripture, there's always this space where political power, and usually it's a monarchy, the monarchy becomes rogue and falls away from God's intentions. And there's two kind of religious leaders that are part of that structure. There are religious leaders that tell the king, it's okay. We are in God's favor. We are God's chosen. God's going to take care of us. Keep operating the status quo. Throughout scriptures, those religious leaders are generally called false prophets over and over and over again. And then you have another set of religious leaders calling on the government, calling on the monarchy to change its ways, to care for the most vulnerable, make this land a land of milk and honey for everybody. Take care of people, don't forsake the poor, give the laborers their wages. I mean, in James, the letter of James, it says, for the wages of the laborers has cried out before God, and the God of hosts have heard their cry. And it comes with a complete judgment on those who withhold wages. Over and over again, you see a religious leader subgroup that are shouting at the powers that be, you've got to change, you've got to care. And in some cases, when that leadership listens to that, hears that, everything ends up being okay. And when they are hard-headed and stiff-necked and refuse that, things absolutely fall apart. And I think we live in a state where the wheels have come off. We've been in leadership like this for almost a quarter of a century, the first quarter of the 21st century. And our state it is not better than what it was 25 years ago. There are more poor people. There are worse health outcomes. Things have only gotten worse. And that's because politicians have not heard and listened and relented from the politics of the status quo. It continues to funnel money to the wealthiest people in the world, and takes, frankly, it comes from dismantling the social safety net, right? So it's a huge redistribution of wealth from the poor to the wealthy, and it's destroying our state and destroying our country.
There are people who are actually arguing right now in Mississippi that anyone sort of using biblical scripture to advocate for expansion is twisting scripture. That's a phrase that I saw recently. That they are sort of pushing progressive values on a state that doesn't want them, and doing it in a very sort of sacrilegious way. As a pastor who has been on these front lines for more than just this session, you have been vocal on this issue for years now. How would you respond to that?
I think it's just absurd. It's just people who don't like what they're hearing. I think that's all that is, and they want to resist the truth that comes from that space. At the end of the day, I've always tried to have my faith guide me, right? That's my prayers. That's how I try to live my life. That's what I've done as a pastor for my career since I was ordained in 1997 at Calvary Baptist Church in New Augusta, Mississippi. That's my North Star. I'm just trying to follow Christ. And how else are we supposed to live if we're not trying to live by Scripture? I mean, what part of love your neighbor is so offensive? What part of the Good Samaritan story is so offensive? I mean, at the end of the day, you look at the Good Samaritan, you have religious leaders walk past twice and leave the man in the ditch. And then there's this kind of Samaritan that's the bad guy. He's the one that comes and saves the guy with his own money. Not only are we supposed to be the Good Samaritan, obviously, that's what that whole story is about. I would even ask, how do we prevent the road to the Judean wilderness from being so dangerous that people would find themselves in the ditch? How do we prevent a system that would allow a road like that to happen? That goes back to the guy in South America, I can't remember, Romero maybe, that said, when I feed the hungry, they call me a Christian. And when I ask why they're hungry, they call me a communist. I think the rub there is exactly that, right? A lot of Christians in America, in the West, in Mississippi, think of everything in terms of individual. And when they start talking about systemic, it makes them feel very uncomfortable.
Final question here. We could talk all day long about this, and we have talked for longer than this before about it. But you've got the mic right now. You've got the platform. We have lawmakers who listen to this podcast every week. We have people who are in touch with those lawmakers who listen to this podcast every week. To ask you as plainly and directly as possible, what would you say to Mississippi lawmakers as they are really sort of in crunch time right now on this debate over Medicaid expansion?
First and foremost, as you craft these policies around affordable health care and closing the health care coverage gap, I would only ask that you don't think about the forces out there that are trying to push you to do something that you don't want to do. But the biggest thing is to hold the compassion for those who suffer at the front of your thoughts. Lead in policy with real compassion. Let go of the voices that talk about those who deserve and those who don't deserve. At the end of the day, who deserves something? Do you deserve something because you're rich? Do you deserve something because you're born into a family that you never have to struggle? Do you deserve something because you're wealthy? Do you not deserve something just because you're poor? Do you not deserve something because you can't get a job? Like, that's just cultural ideology that's been pervasive here. Let all that go and think seriously about compassion for the most vulnerable, compassion for the hardworking Mississippians that work hard every day of their life and cannot afford health care. And because of that, they don't go to the doctor. And when they don't go to the doctor, they end up getting very sick. And then they become disabled and can't work, and then are on some kind of federal assistance. It doesn't have to be this. We can create, and especially legislators, they are the creating body. They are creating our system every legislative session. They can create a healthier, a more caring and kind and compassionate society if they allow themselves to be led by that when they create these policies. It can be that simple. It can be that simple. And I think, listen, Mississippians are good folks. We do love each other. You go to Kemper County, you go to Bolivar County, you go to the coast, you go to the Northeast. People in Mississippi care for each other. I hydroplaned down the road with my 3 kids. I don't know how many cars stopped on I-55 in the pouring rain to make sure I was okay. White, black, brown, people care in this state. And it's okay to pass policy that reflects the compassion and love of this state. I hope they feel like the people of this state give them permission to do the right thing.
Jason Coker, thank you so much for being here. Thank you for your leadership on this issue. Thank you for sharing your perspective. It is a unique one, but I think one that every Mississippian should hear right now. So thanks for everything you're doing, and thanks for being here today.
Thanks, Adam.
As we cover the biggest political stories in the state, you don't want to miss an episode of The Other Side. We'll bring you more reporting from every corner of the state, sharing the voices of Mississippians and how they are impacted by the news. So what do we need from you, the listener? We need your feedback and support. If you listen to the podcast on a player like iTunes or Stitcher, please subscribe to the show and leave us a review. We also have an email in which you can share your feedback. That address is podcast@MississippiToday.org. Y'all can also reach out to me or any of my colleagues through social media or email. And as always, thank you for your feedback and support. Subscribe to our weekly podcast on your favorite podcast app or stream episodes online at MississippiToday.org/theotherside. For the Mississippi Today team, I'm Adam Ganucheau. The Other Side is produced by Mississippi Today and engineered by Blue Sky Studios. We hope you'll join us for our next episode.